Alright, let's be honest for a second. In eFootball, every card looks perfect on paper. You see the overall rating, you see the shiny booster, you see all the green stats, and suddenly you think you've just signed the most broken player in the game. But once you actually start playing matches, something feels off. Maybe the striker keeps missing easy chances. Maybe the defender loses aerial duels he shouldn't lose. Or maybe your winger is always in the wrong position. And that's when you realize something important. Every player in eFootball has a weakness. Some weaknesses are small. Some weaknesses completely change how you should use the player. So today, we're continuing the series, Players and Their Weaknesses in eFootball, Part 2. And trust me, some of these might actually surprise you, because a few players on this list are insanely good, but they still have one small flaw that can change everything. Let's start with one of the most reliable goalkeepers in the entire game. First up, new 107, Petr Cech. Now, usually when we talk about weaknesses, goalkeepers always have one. Some have bad reflexes, some have bad reach, some are just too short. But Cech is one of those rare goalkeepers where, honestly, there isn't really a weakness. He's 196 centimeters tall, which already makes him one of the biggest keepers in the game. Then you look at the important stats. 100 goalkeeping, 100 reflexes, 97 reach. That combination alone makes him extremely reliable. When finesse shots come flying into the top corner, Cech has the reach to stretch for them. When strikers shoot from close range, his reflexes kick in instantly. And because he's a defensive goalkeeper, he stays closer to his line, which makes him even more consistent. Some keepers rush out too much and get chipped easily. Cech rarely makes that mistake. So when it comes to weaknesses, Cech doesn't really have one. If you have him in your squad, your goal is basically protected by one of the safest goalkeepers in eFootball. Next, we have a defender that attackers absolutely hate facing, new 107 Stam. Now, if you've ever played against Stam, you probably already know what I'm about to say. Trying to dribble past him feels impossible. He's tall, he's aggressive, and once he locks onto a striker, it's basically game over. Stam has elite defensive awareness, which means he reads attacks before they happen. Through balls, intercepted, physical duels, he wins most of them. And with his huge frame and strength, even powerful strikers struggle to push him off the ball. But here's the crazy part. When we talk about weaknesses, Stam also doesn't really have one. Usually defenders are either strong but slow, or fast but weak. Stam is both strong and fast enough. He dominates in the air, he wins tackles, and he positions himself perfectly, which is exactly why many players consider him one of the best center backs in eFootball. Sometimes the biggest weakness a defender can have is simply not having Stam on your team. Now, unfortunately, not every defender in this pack is built the same. Let's talk about Thomas Vermaelen. Now don't get me wrong, Vermaelen is actually a solid defender. His defensive awareness is good. His tackling is strong, and he can still compete physically. But there's one problem that becomes obvious once you start playing matches: his height. Vermaelen is 183 centimeters tall, and in real football that might not sound like a big issue, but in eFootball, height can make a huge difference, because many attackers in the game are extremely tall. Think about players like Erling Haaland. When crosses come into the box, those extra centimeters matter. A taller defender like Stam can easily win aerial duels, but Vermaelen sometimes struggles in those situations, especially when facing big strikers or long crosses. That doesn't make him bad, but it does mean you need to be careful when defending crosses, because his 183 centimeters height is definitely his biggest weakness. Now let's move to one of the most dangerous strikers ever added to the game, Adriano. If you've used Adriano before, you already know the feeling. The moment he shoots, the ball flies like a missile. His kicking power is ridiculous. Goalkeepers sometimes don't even react. Long shots, powerful strikes, insane finishing. Adriano can score goals from almost anywhere. But there's one small weakness that becomes noticeable when you try to dribble with him: balance. Adriano's balance sits around 77, which isn't terrible, but it's not great either, and that means when defenders apply pressure, he can sometimes lose control of the ball. Smaller, more agile players can turn quickly and keep possession. Adriano is more of a power striker. If you try to dribble too much with him, you might lose the ball, but if you use him the right way, receive the ball, turn, shoot, then that weakness barely matters, because once Adriano fires a shot, defenders and goalkeepers are just spectators. Next, we have one of the most elegant forwards in football history, new 107 blitzcurler Alessandro Del Piero. Del Piero is the type of player who feels incredibly smooth on the ball. His dribbling is great. His finesse shots are beautiful, and when he curls the ball toward the top corner, it almost feels automatic. He's especially deadly when cutting inside from the left side. But even a player as technical as Del Piero has one weakness: physical contact. His physical contact sits around 76, which means he's not the strongest forward in the game. If a powerful defender presses him aggressively, he can get pushed off the ball. Players like Stam or Virgil van Dijk can easily win physical duels against him. So the key to using Del Piero properly is simple. Don't try to outmuscle defenders. Instead, use his dribbling, movement, and finesse shots, because once he gets a little space near the box, the curl is coming, and the goalkeeper might not even move. Now let's talk about a striker that many players love using because of his speed. New 105 acceleration, burst Alexandre Pato. Pato is extremely quick. His acceleration allows him to burst past defenders, and when he's running behind the defensive line, he becomes very dangerous. But there's one part of his game that clearly isn't his strength: heading. His heading stat is around 73, which means aerial duels are not his thing. Crossing the ball to Pato rarely works. Against tall defenders, he almost always loses the aerial battle. So if you're using Pato as your striker, avoid playing like a crossing team. Instead, focus on through balls, speed, and runs behind the defense, because that's where Pato becomes lethal. Next, we have one of the most exciting young players in the game. New player of the week, Lamine Yamal. Yamal is an incredible dribbler. His close control is amazing. He can glide past defenders with ease. And when you start running down the wing with him, defenders struggle to keep up. But there's one weakness that affects his positioning: attacking awareness. His attacking awareness sits around 80, which is decent, but not elite. And that means sometimes he doesn't make the smartest attacking runs. Some players with higher awareness always position themselves perfectly for passes or shots. Yamal occasionally arrives a little late or stands in slightly awkward spaces, but the moment he gets the ball, that weakness becomes much less noticeable, because his dribbling ability allows him to create chances on his own. Now let's talk about a striker that many people are still learning how to use. Player of the week, Ekitike. Ekitike has great movement. He's tall, he can hold up the ball, and he actually fits certain tactical systems really well. But there's one stat that sometimes frustrates players: finishing. His finishing sits around 85, which isn't terrible, but it's also not elite for a striker. And that means he can occasionally miss chances that top strikers would score easily, especially in tight situations inside the box. So if you're using Ekitike, try to create clear scoring opportunities rather than forcing difficult shots, because when the chance is clean, he can still finish very well. Finally, we have one of the best young defenders in modern football. Player of the week, Saliba. Saliba is incredibly solid defensively. He's calm on the ball, he reads attacks well, and he's very reliable in one-on-one situations. But there are two areas where he's slightly weaker: jumping and heading. His jumping is around 81 and his heading sits around 78, which means against extremely strong aerial strikers, he can sometimes struggle, especially when defending crosses. Players like Haaland or other tall forwards might win those aerial duels. That doesn't mean Saliba is a bad defender. Far from it. He's still excellent in ground duels, positioning, and interceptions. But if your opponent relies heavily on crossing, you might notice that aerial weakness. And that's the thing about eFootball. Even the best players in the game have small weaknesses. But understanding those weaknesses actually makes you a better player, because once you know them, you can start using each player in the best possible way. But now I'm curious: which player do you think has the most noticeable weakness in the game? Because there are definitely some cards that look amazing, but secretly struggle in certain situations. And if you enjoyed this, you might want to see part 3, so hit that like button and subscribe, because there are still a lot of players in eFootball with weaknesses that people don't talk about.